It was just another routine evening for Officer James as he patrolled the quiet streets of his small town. Pulling over speeding cars was nothing new, but this stop felt different from the moment it began. The car he flagged down was an older model, its windows slightly tinted, and the driver seemed nervous, fumbling for paperwork. James approached cautiously, his flashlight scanning the interior. That's when he noticed her, a little girl sitting in the back seat. At first, she seemed ordinary enough, clutching a stuffed bear tightly. But something about her eyes sent a shiver down his spine. They weren't filled with the innocence he expected, but with something deeper, something haunting. James's hand hovered over his radio as questions raced through his mind. Who was she? And why did the driver seem so desperate to hide her? What James was about to uncover would change everything. Officer James tried to stay calm as he glanced back at the little girl. She didn't say a word, but her small hands clutched the bear so tightly that its seams looked ready to burst. The driver, a middle-aged man with sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air, kept mumbling about a family emergency. James asked the routine questions, license, registration, where they were headed, but the man's answers didn't quite add up. Something was off. Looking back at the girl, James noticed her clothes seemed mismatched, almost like they'd been grabbed in a hurry. She wouldn't make eye contact, staring blankly at the stuffed animal instead. A strange, uneasy silence hung in the air, broken only by the sound of passing cars. James felt the weight of the moment grow heavier. Was this just an innocent misunderstanding, or was something far more sinister unfolding right before his eyes? Officer James couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. His training told him to trust his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him to dig deeper. The man's hands trembled slightly as he handed over his license, his eyes darting toward the back seat. James decided to ask the little girl a simple question, hoping to ease his growing suspicion. "Hey there, sweetie, are you okay?" he asked gently, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she shifted her gaze to the driver, her grit on the stuffed bear tightening even more. The driver cut in quickly, his voice shaky but firm. "She's shy. Doesn't talk much around strangers," he said, forcing a nervous laugh. But James noticed something else. There were faint smudges on the girl's face, like she'd been crying. A chilling thought crept into his mind. Was she too afraid to speak? James felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he stood there, the quiet tension between him and the driver thickening with every second. He stepped back slightly, radaring in the license plate for a quick check while keeping his eyes locked on the car. The dispatch came back with unexpected news. The vehicle was registered to a different name, someone from a nearby town. James returned to the driver's side window, his calm tone masking the unease bubbling beneath the surface. "Sir, who owns this car?" he asked, watching closely for a reaction. The man hesitated, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror before muttering, It's my sister's. She lent it to me." But the hesitation, the nervous tapping of his fingers against the steering wheel, told another story. Meanwhile, James couldn't ignore the girl's silence. Her stillness felt unnatural, almost like she was waiting for something, or someone, to intervene. The air seemed to thrum with unspoken urgency as James prepared to make a decision that could change everything. Just as Officer James was about to press the driver further, a faint sound broke the silence. A ringtone coming from the man's phone on the passenger seat. The driver fumbled to silence it, but not before James caught a glimpse of the caller ID. It read, "Unknown." Something about it felt off, and James couldn't ignore the unease creeping over him. "Mind answering that?" James asked, his voice steady but firm. The man shook his head quickly. "It's not important," he muttered, sliding the phone into his pocket. But his movements were rushed, almost panicked, and James noticed his grip tighten on the steering wheel. At that moment, James heard a muffled noise from the trunk of the car, a faint thud, like something shifting. His eyes narrowed as he took a step back, one hand instinctively resting on his holster. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," James said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The driver froze, his face paling as if James had just uncovered his darkest secret. Something bigger was at play, and James knew he was running out of time to figure it out. The driver hesitated for a moment too long, his fingers twitching nervously. James's command grew firmer. "Out of the car, now." Slowly, the man opened the door and stepped out, his eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape route. James instructed him to stand by the hood of the car, keeping a close watch. "Pop the trunk," James ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through him. The driver stammered, "It's nothing, just tools." But his trembling hands betrayed him as he fumbled with the key fob. The trunk clicked open, and James moved cautiously, flashlight in hand. What he found left him momentarily speechless: a backpack, stuffed animals, and a small blanket, but also a set of zip ties and duct tape. Before James could process it all, the little girl suddenly spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's not my dad," she said, tears welling in her wide, frightened eyes. The revelation hit James like a thunderbolt. He radioed for backup immediately, securing the driver in handcuffs as he protested weakly, his excuses unraveling with every word. As James turned his attention back to the girl, he assured her softly, "You're safe now. I promise." But just as relief began to set in, James's radio crackled again, a second alert about a vehicle matching this car's description, but with another passenger reported earlier. James's heart sank. Was there someone else still out there? As backup arrived and the driver was taken into custody, Officer James focused on comforting the little girl. She finally began to open up, revealing her name and details about her real family. It turned out she had been reported missing just hours earlier, and the man behind the wheel had abducted her from a local park. The items in the trunk painted a chilling picture of what could have happened if James hadn't trusted his instincts. While the girl was safely reunited with her parents later that night, James couldn't shake the thought of the second alert. A search of the area eventually led authorities to another car, abandoned near a rest stop. Though the second suspect managed to flee, key evidence was recovered, setting the stage for future arrests. For James, the night was a reminder of the importance of vigilance. One small moment of suspicion had saved a life.